Let's have some fun chatting with Mr. Jeff Cohen. Hey, Jeff, welcome to Silent Sales Machine Radio, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks for having me on. Excited to share with your audience and community.
This is great, man. I've been really looking forward to this for a long time because when I look at the circle of folks that I know in this industry, you're quite possibly the guy at the top of the list who has his finger on the pulse of something that I don't have myself. I mean, we've got our community and we do our once a year live event, but you're with Seller Labs and you sponsor a lot of events for online sellers and even specifically Amazon sellers. And so you're at a lot of these live events, and I thought you'd be a great guy to kind of give us what's going on out there in the seller community in general. Just your perspective is very valuable. And I want to spend some time too. I know you just got back from a really cool trip. You went to China, and Amazon is exploding in China. And some people think only negative thoughts when they hear China and Amazon, but you've got maybe some positive twists that we should be considering here and some opportunities as well. And I love also that you're one of these guys, for those who don't know you that well, you've got a real abundance mindset about all of this. And we've had some lengthy discussions about just how huge this opportunity is. So there's all kinds of fun directions we could go today, but let's just start there with, what's the mood of the industry right now among Amazon sellers, and talk about some of the events you've seen and make some observations there for our community.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me on. When I look back at 2016, I think I attended upwards of 17 conference and trade shows, right? And so we'll kind of differentiate between the two. I have to explain this to my wife every once in a while, right?
Right. There's
so
different.
A conference is when you're going somewhere and there's educational materials that are being presented. It's a little bit more of a formal learning environment versus a trade show where you're going somewhere and you'd be like sourcing products or meeting vendors, looking for opportunities, right? So that's the big difference between that. And in 2016, I had the opportunity to not just go to trade shows and conferences in the US, but I also went to some in Europe and in China. And it gave me a very global perspective to where Amazon is today, but more importantly, where Amazon is going in the future.
That's exciting. Yeah. Just to be able to look a year or 5 years out and kind of imagine and dream. I mean, if you go back 10 years, none of us imagined any of this. So it's virtually impossible for us to imagine what the world looks like 10 years from now from an online marketing and business perspective, but we can certainly do our best. I think between the information you're being exposed to and the audiences that you've been in front of and the people you've met and the things we're doing around here, I mean, if two guys are going to kind of paint a picture about where this thing's heading and what the mood is, I love thinking that way because it helps prepare us. How should we be thinking about all of this? Should we be nervous? Should we be excited? What's the risks? So yeah, just fill us in. What have you learned?
Yeah, so I am very bullish on Amazon. When you look at 2016 and you see that the growth of 2016 on Amazon mimics or even exceeds what we saw in 2015, that only begins to indicate that as we continue to move forward, the growth that we've seen in the past is predictive of the growth that we'll see in the future. And it's not always 100%, but if you imagine a very long rope being placed across the stage of a trade show, that rope indicates total retail sales, both on and offline. And only 10 to 15% of that rope represents online. And so the majority of sales are still
Yep.
represented
That's right.
with offline sales, meaning that the opportunity for online growth is still massive.
Yeah. The U.S. Census data tells us that number in the U.S. alone, it's about 9%. And that was through 3/4 of 2016. So it's probably gone up. We're probably over 10% now. But yeah, we're in the infancy. I love making that point.
And I think you covered this in a previous episode of your podcast, but in 2016, Black Friday was larger than 2015 Cyber Monday, and then Cyber Monday beat Black Friday. And, one of the things that I think the terminology is changing as fast as everything else. So we don't call it Black Friday and Cyber Monday. We now call it, it's the 5, right? So
yeah,
it's
the big
now
5.
From Thanksgiving through Black Monday is the whole Thanksgiving holiday 5 season. And we're seeing massive growth. And as we look forward, for Amazon, they're continuing to push Prime, which means that sellers are getting their products faster and they're changing the landscape of how shoppers shop. And that's, I think, why Amazon is positioned to continue to be in the forefront. Because if you purchase products on a different website, your shopping experience just doesn't compare to that experience that you have at Amazon. You're going to get your shipping notification 3 days later because it took them 2 or 3 days to prep and ship your product. You're going to get your product 4 or 5 days after that. And with Amazon, you order your product and it's delivered a day and a half later.
Yeah, or even, we're using Prime now at my house. We get bags,
Right.
Hey, we're out of milk. My 14-year-old orders milk. Bam, there's milk and cereal on the porch an hour later. The world is changing rapidly, and Amazon is the transaction agent behind that change. No question. Amazon is the future, at least short term.
So the conference that I just got back to was in China, and it was an Amazon Global Sellers Conference. And there were 2 really big themes at that conference. It was the only conference I've ever been to that had multiple senior vice presidents from Amazon speaking at the conference.
Yeah, I was texting you. I'm like, hey, dude, get one of them to come to my event, please.
Yeah.
I can't even get near them.
Yeah, they don't show up at events in the U.S.
Yeah, they just don't.
Talk a little bit about why.
Sure.
But, there were 2 really big themes that came out of that conference. And one was that Amazon is a group of pioneers and builders. And so they were telling the story that Amazon started creating AWS, which is the web services group